Two fields, everything else is a conversation between them. According to TTFT, there are exactly two fundamental fields, the dielectric field and the magnetic field. Everything you can experience, matter, forces, energy, gravity, light, is some form of interaction between these two. Now, I warned you this was coming. I'm going to say something that sounds like I just threw a pork roast onto a kosher dinner table. I believe there is a non-physical dimension and a physical dimension. The dielectric field represents the non-physical dimension. You could call it ether, but not the old rigid ether that Michelson and Morley killed in 1887, but something more like a stochastic fluid-like background. A sea, very similar to quantum vacuum. On top of that, I personally believe that this ether and consciousness are, at some level, the same thing. I know mainstream physics avoids both of those words like they carry a disease, but I think that avoidance is precisely why mainstream physics has never managed to unify everything. You can't complete a puzzle while deliberately ignoring half the pieces. There, Beelzebub has been named at the pulpit. We can move on. The magnetic field is the physical dimension, matter, volume, magnitude, space, the very dimension your body occupies right now. And it takes the shape of a toroid, a donut, a smoke ring, a vortex. Why a toroid specifically? The short answer. It is the only geometry that can simultaneously account for all forces, all constants, and all known interactions from first principles. Here's the intuition. Imagine the non-physical dimension, the ether, as an infinite, boundless ocean. Now imagine a disturbance in that ocean. What emerges in the middle of that disturbance is a toroidal magnetic field, like an underwater balloon, pushing the water out and holding a pocket of space open. The magnetic field is that pocket. Space itself is the opposite of the ether. It's the void carved out by the magnetic field. And just like water rushes into a submerged balloon through any opening, the ether does the same with these toroidal fields. That rushing, that pressure, that flow, that is what we experience as forces. Gravity, magnetism, the strong nuclear force, all of it is the ether trying to close a hole that a field is keeping open. Even the name magnetism is wrong. Actually, it is the very same dielectric field movement that explains nuclear forces and gravity, but I used it here just to make things as clear as possible. The golden ratio, the universe's tuning fork. Before I can explain matter, I need to tell you about the single most important number in TTFT. Not pi, not the speed of light, it is phi, the golden ratio, 1.618. Every stable natural system tends toward this ratio: nautilus shells, galaxy spirals, the proportions of a human face, the branching of trees. Physicists usually treat this as a pretty coincidence. In TTFT, it is not a coincidence. It is the mathematical signature of equilibrium between the two fields. When the dielectric and magnetic fields reach energy balance, they don't settle at a 1:1 ratio. They settle at 1 to 1.618. And crucially, this number is not an input. It falls out of the geometry automatically. Once phi emerges, almost every other constant follows from it almost without resistance. The fine structure constant, the weak mixing angle, the electron mass, the gravitational constant. They are not mysterious gifts from nowhere. They are consequences of geometry finding its natural balance. Matter is light that learned to trap itself. Now we can talk about matter. In mainstream physics, the standard model in GR, the gauge structure is chosen and installed by hand before anything else. You pick your symmetry groups, U1 for electromagnetism, SU2 for the weak force, SU3 for the strong force. You write the rules, you call the results fundamental. In TTFT, you don't choose anything. You start with geometry and you ask, what algebra does this geometry force on you? The answer comes back as a theorem, not a postulate. The gauge structure doesn't get drawn on a blueprint. It crystallizes on its own when torsion flows on a compact manifold. There was never a choice to make. So what is matter in this picture? Think of a single smoke ring floating through air. That is a genus 1 configuration, one toroid. And that is exactly what a photon is in TTFT. A single looping torsion vortex, electromagnetic radiation, light. Now what happens when two smoke rings lock together, each flowing through the whole of the other? You get a genus 2 configuration, two toroids mutually coupled, each sustained by the flow through the other. This is no longer just light passing through. This is something that stays. This is matter, specifically the lepton family, electrons, muons, tau particles. Add a third toroid into the system, 3 coupled vortices all interlocked, and you get genus 3. That's the quark sector, the building blocks of protons and neutrons. 1 toroid equals light, 2 toroids locked together equals matter, 3 toroids locked together equals nuclear matter. Matter, at its most fundamental level, is light that has learned to trap itself. The double toroid, where forces are born. Now let's look closely at that genus 2 system, 2 toroids facing each other, because this is where things get genuinely extraordinary. Understanding this configuration holds secrets to all known forces and potential free energy. Imagine 2 smoke rings approaching each other face to face. Each one is pulling ether through its own hyperboloid, trying to sustain itself. When they get close enough, something remarkable can happen. They don't collide and scatter, they lock. Each one's inflow becomes the other's outflow. They form a closed, self-sustaining system. This phenomena has name, and it is called vortex ring leapfrogging. Now look at what this geometry produces. Along the shared central axis, there is tension. The 2 toroids are pulling toward each other through the shared core. This tension is what we experience as magnetic attraction, 2 aligned magnetic dipoles. At the interface between them, the ether cannot escape sideways. It is trapped between the 2 toroidal flows, compressed. This internal pressure, the thing that holds the system together against all attempts to pull it apart, is what we experience as the strong nuclear force. Confinement is not a mysterious property that needs to be inserted by hand. It is what happens when ether gets trapped between interlocked toroids and has nowhere to go. Zooming out from the whole double toroid system, there is now a large-scale ether deficit around it. The 2 toroids together are consuming ether from the surrounding medium faster than the surrounding medium can replenish. The surrounding ether flows inward toward the low-pressure zone. From a distance, this looks exactly like gravitational attraction. Masses don't pull each other, they both create ether deficits, and the ether between them flows to equalize the pressure, pushing them toward each other in the process. 3 forces, 1 geometry, no free parameters. The flash matrix, controlling the universe's most fundamental pattern. Let me be direct about something before we go further. That genus 2 configuration, 2 toroids locked together, is not just an interesting way to think about matter. It is the key to understanding everything in this universe, everything. If you fully grasp what is happening in that double toroid system, you have in your hands the blueprint for controlling gravity, for manifesting energy, and in principle for manifesting matter itself using nothing but fields. That is not a metaphor, that is the engineering target. The flash matrix is the device I have spent years developing, and it is built on exactly this principle. It is not a generator in the conventional sense. It does not burn fuel. It does not convert one stored form of energy into another. What it does is far more fundamental. It mimics the double toroid system deliberately and precisely. The device uses carefully chosen geometric shapes as waveguides, physical structures designed to force the ether into the same kind of disturbance patterns that nature uses to create magnetic fields. When the geometry is right and the conditions are right, the ether doesn't just flow through the device. It organizes itself. It forms the same interlocked toroidal structures that are responsible for every force we know. And when those structures form, the tension appears, the compression appears, the ether deficit appears. All the same mechanisms that produce magnetism, confinement, and gravity in nature are now happening inside a device you can build on a workbench. The energy that emerges looks like it comes from nothing. In a sense, it does. There is no conventional fuel source. But nothing is not accurate. It comes from the ether, from the same inexhaustible background field that has been powering every atom in the universe since the beginning. The flash matrix doesn't create energy out of nothing. It creates the conditions under which the ether has no choice but to give it up. That is what we have been missing for a century. Not resources, not cleverness, the right geometry between 2 fields. Inside the flash matrix, how the geometry works. Let me walk you through what is actually inside this device, because every single component has a reason to be there, and together they form something that is less like an engineering assembly and more like a physical argument made in metal and quartz crystal. At the very center is a rod, not symbolic, literally central, both physically and functionally. The center rod is the primary pathway for ether movement. In the double toroid picture we just walked through, there is a shared axis, the line through the middle of both toroids where the inflow and outflow are most intense. The center rod is that axis made physical. It is the throat of the hyperboloid. Ether moves through it. Surrounding that rod is a quartz crystal. Quartz is not chosen for mystical reasons. It is chosen because quartz is piezoelectric, meaning it responds mechanically to electromagnetic fields and responds electromagnetically to mechanical pressure. When the ether flow creates the toroidal field structure around the crystal experiences what I described earlier as the gravitic effect, the ether pressure differential that in free space we would call gravitational attraction. The crystal responds to that pressure, and its response, its mechanical and electromagnetic output, feeds back into the system, restarting the loop. The crystal is not passive decoration, it is the reignition mechanism. Then there is the PCB, the circuit board, and this is where the geometry becomes precise. The board carries two sets of spirals, one set wound clockwise, one set wound counterclockwise, and the ratio between them is not arbitrary. The number of clockwise spirals to counterclockwise spirals is set at the golden ratio. You already know why that number matters. It is the equilibrium point between the two fields. By encoding phi directly into the geometry of the conductors, the board forces the two toroidal flows into the same energy balance that nature uses to create stable matter. The two toroids don't just coexist, they chase each other. Each one's outflow becomes the other's inflow, exactly like in vortex ring leapfrogging. They are locked into a self-sustaining pursuit that neither one can escape and neither one wants to. But also where the clockwise and counterclockwise spirals cross, something else happens. The opposing rotational flows meet and interfere not destructively but constructively in the way that produces standing structures, not standing waves in the usual sense, standing vortices. Localized, stable, rotating disturbances that sit in fixed positions determined by the geometry of the crossings. And a standing vortex in the ether is by definition a magnetic field. The board doesn't just carry current, it manufactures magnetic topology. Those fields are then guided outward to the hemispheres. The hemispheres are non-ferromagnetic, deliberately so, because ferromagnetic material would absorb and distort the field rather than guide it. Their curved geometry channels the magnetic structure into the same shape as the toroids in the genus 2 system. Each hemisphere becomes, in effect, one of the toroids. The device is not simulating the double toroid system at a distance, it is physically instantiating it. The hemispheres are the magnetic field, in the same sense that in a real electron the toroidal torsion vortex is the magnetic field. And then the part that looks impossible until you understand the ether picture, the output. The center rod, sitting at the axis of all of this activity, becomes a conduit. The ether that is being drawn in, organized, and accelerated by the toroidal structure flows outward along that axis and radiates off the device, not through wires, not through any physical connection. Wirelessly through the ether itself, the same medium that is carrying every other interaction in this system. A receiver placed at a distance can harvest that flow as usable electrical energy. Nothing is attached to the device, no cables, no contacts. The energy transfer happens the way gravity happens, the way light happens, through the field across empty space, because the field is not separate from space. The field is what space is made of. This is the flash matrix, a device that does not generate energy in the classical sense. It creates the geometric conditions under which the ether organizes itself, sustains itself, and gives up energy to anything in range that knows how to receive it. And here is perhaps the most remarkable thing about it. There are no electronic components inside the flash matrix. No capacitors, no resistors, no diodes, no transistors, no semiconductors of any kind. Nothing that any electrical engineer would recognize as the working parts of a circuit, just geometry. A rod, a crystal, spirals wound in precise ratios, two induction plates next to the spirals and two curved surfaces shaped to guide a field. That is the entire device. No component in it does anything in the conventional sense because nothing in it is conventional. The work is not done by electronics, it is done by shape, by proportion, by the relationship between one curve and another. The device functions the way a nautilus shell functions, the way a galaxy arm functions, the way a DNA strand functions, not because of what it is made of, but because of the form it takes. This is what it means to engineer with first principles rather than with convention. When you understand what a field actually is, when you understand that geometry and physics are not two separate languages, but the same language spoken at different scales, you realize that a capacitor is just a clumsy approximation of something the right shape can do more cleanly, more completely, and without any moving parts or consumable materials at all. The flash matrix doesn't fight nature to produce an output. It simply gives nature the right stage and then gets out of the way. Simple and elegant, but effective and beautiful at the same time.